Okay, I'd like to call the Berkley Plan Commission meeting for August 27th, 2019 to order. Everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have a call the roll, please?
Buckler?
Yes.
Here. Murad?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Campbell?
Here.
Kempner?
Here.
Patterson?
Here.
Trotto?
Here.
And Smith.
Here.
And Kristen Kapelansky emailed me this morning and said that she would not be able to attend.
Okay. At this point, entertain an approval, a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Ms. Schluto, call the roll.
Buckler?
Please.
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Kempner?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. Okay. Look for a motion to approve the minutes of last month's meeting.
I so move to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 23rd, 2019. Second.
Do we have any comments or revisions? I have one. Nobody? On page, oh, we don't have a page. Item 4. Apparently, Mr. Absent was absent, so I was supposed to say Richardson.
So, my apologies.
I'll answer to that.
It's been worse. Okay, roll call, please.
Buckler?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Kempner?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. Any communications?
Yes, I'd like to draw your attention to, there are 3 items that were on your desk in front of you. There were 2 letters in regards to the rezoning at 3339 Cummings from the public, and then there was 1 email that was for the 3818 12 Mile Road.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, we open up for public comment. Comments for items that are not on tonight's agenda, and if anybody's interested, please come forward and sign in on the sheet on the end of the desk there. State your name. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and city of residence. Planning Commission members will not engage in a discussion on these comments. And please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. If you require any require a response from a city department, please add your contact information on the sign-in sheet. Anybody want to comment on anything not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move along. Item number 1. If you would
Yes,
read
thank
it, please.
you. The case before you, SP-05-19, is for a site plan review for 3818 12 Mile Road. It is for the property at the northeast corner of 12 Mile Road and Perry Avenue. The applicant is proposing a facade change and a change of use at that location. The subject property is proposed to be reoccupied and remodeled as an art studio for the property owner, as well as to hold classes to the public and other small gatherings. This case was before the Planning Commission on July 23rd, 2019, where the Planning Commission had noted a few items that they wished the applicant and the property owner to address on the revised plans. The property owner and the applicant have addressed those concerns related to the facade changes, most specifically the chimney at the front of the property, the dormers, and the bevel of the siding they have revised. So those plans are before you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody on the Planning Commission have any comments?
I do. I have a question. So can the applicant come forward, or has Rob?
Actually, I'm sorry, I should have said that.
Sure.
I'm new, I don't do this too often.
No
but
worries.
Would the applicant please, they would like to give us a short presentation.
Sure. Tim Yankee, 10864 Nadine, Huntington Woods, applying for the facade change over on 12 Mile on Prairie. And to expand on a little bit what you said, we also relocated the fireplace as well. So we took into consideration all your ideas and concepts about lowering the brick, changing the windows, removing the dormer. So we did all that. Got rid of the dormer, got rid of the chimney, relocated it, and we changed the facade as well. There was concern about the D block of the log intruding maybe into the sidewalk, which was never going to be an issue. But we actually applied a little thinner as well. So we're looking at maybe an inch of a wood siding as well. And that'll be nice and stained up, sanded and stained up. So, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. And like I said, we did comply with your suggestions, and they were good suggestions as well.
Okay, Ms. Buck.
So before we concluded our discussion last month, you brought up the possibility of some classes and possibly events at the facility, which gave me a little bit of pause with the number of parking spots that you have. I'm not as detailed, but has that been taken into consideration, and how and where would these cars go if you did have some kind of classes or
Right.
events?
So-
And then are we willing to deal with, we're going to have to discuss that.
Yeah, they would probably be children on a bus that
Okay.
would probably meet at Park West
Oh,
Gallery in Farmington and come and be dropped off, and then
Okay.
the bus would relocate until after the class. We've done it a couple times
Okay.
in Pontiac, actually in Southfield at Park West, and in Nashville, we did some public classes as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Really? Mr. Richardson?
Have you given any consideration to adding lighting to the rear of the building? I'm picturing operation which might have odd hours and might actually be open after dark.
Yeah,
Thoughts on that?
sure, and that's Joe Novinsky. He takes care of all the lighting.
We have a fairly narrow backyard, and our neighbors are here tonight to speak to that if you'd like to hear their thoughts. We don't want to put any light on there that's unnecessary. We have there's a fairly sizable parking lot standard bolted to the side of the building now that's coming down. We have 3 60-watt lamps that are positioned on the building, standard height, and that's the extent of the lighting we think we need. If you take a look, the neighbor across the street has a light that spills out into the parking lot. That would be me. We have plenty of light on that corner. We don't need any more light than we need, and we think those 3 lights are more than adequate, switched, not timed, and when they need light, they can put it on. Any other questions
Mr.
for me?
Novinsky, what are those light fixtures? I saw the 3 light fixtures on here. What are they?
They're standard 60-watt fixtures.
Are they shielded? Are they
No, they're just regular 60-watt wall mount fixtures.
whatever that is? Okay. I mean,
Would
Okay,
you
but-
like us to bring the fixture? I've never done that in a planning commission meeting in 37 years.
we do ask for fixtures. I understand it's only 60 watts, and that's fine. And you are about 45, 50 feet away from the property line. So I don't see. I'm just curious if you had a better explanation. of what those were.
We did not get to that level of detail
Okay.
yet, Marty.
Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, I do. So last month, we kind of brought up that this building looks like a house in the commercial district. And I thought we gave you some direction as to try to come up with something that would fit a little better into the commercial district. And I don't see that as, this as being that. It looks like a beautiful house on 12 Mile. So,
If that's a bad thing, I don't understand. But Have you seen what's there currently?
Yeah, I've driven by it.
Yeah.
I drive
Yeah.
by it. But
Well, remember
but
that
part
we
of-
want to
part of-
stay in
part of-
conjunction with the previous studio up north, and so.
I understand that. But part of what we have to deal with is when we approve things, we're also setting a precedence. So if we approve this and then 20 other people want to build a similar building, the character of Berkeley would considerably change.
It'd be a positive change, I believe.
I don't know about that, but that's your opinion, and this is my opinion.
Sure,
so-
you're 100% right. If that's a bad design, I don't know how.
I didn't say it was a bad design.
Right. Well, perhaps it's too residential, but I can't concern myself with making something and complying with what other people want my studio to look like. If it's within boundaries and limitations and zoning permits, then I think we're golden. If there's something that stands out that says it's just, sticks out like a sore thumb and you don't want it, then that's fine as well.
I'm just one opinion.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. It's it's unique. And I'll tell you what, when people come in especially coming in from the west, heading east on the 12 Mile, they're going to come into Royal Oak, or they're going to come into Berkeley, and they're going to see something. Wow, that's pretty substantial. That's unique. That's different. Where are we? Well, we're in the Arts District. What's this studio? Well, it's an art studio. Part of the largest privately owned art studio in the world. And we're going to hold events, and we're going to have artists from around the globe coming to this studio, collaborating, painting with me, doing children's, instructional paintings, holding events. So I think it's a golden opportunity. If you want an arts district, you're talking to the right person. You're talking to the right company. I mean, Park West Gallery over there in Southfield is the mecca for privately owned art, and we want to bring it to Berkeley. So right now I'm in Birmingham, and I've grown out of that place. I have 2,400 square feet, and I need more space. I need to produce more art.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I do have one
Toronto?
question.
Sure.
One thing I did bring up was the fact that we've done a lot of art in our city in general. And one thing I brought up in the last meeting was potential of putting up some artwork on the outside that's similar to some of the other areas in the city. I mean, as I said before, I looked at your art. It looks fantastic.
Thank you.
Put some of it on display outside. Show it off a little bit. Try and bring what's going on in the community out a little bit.
Oh, what we could bring to the city, I mean, public art, sculptures, we can bring in other artists. I see you have murals going up everywhere.
I'm talking about like a mural on the outside of the building.
Oh, all day long. I'd love to be a part of that. In fact, maybe even on the side of this, or maybe on Joe's building next door or something like that. You never know. But or both. So I'm open for that. And if you need a hand, if you need any suggestions or guidelines or help or donations, if you have fundraisers, we can incorporate a lot of donations from different artists. I can donate art, and if there's something that we can do to help the schools or the library or whatever, we could hold fundraisers. And let's put Berkeley on the map regarding art.
Anybody? No? Okay, I have a couple comments. I see you move the barrier-free access lane or space, and I think that's a good move for usability of the parking lot. You added the bike rack. Hopefully no one backs into the bicycles. But it's a tight site, and there's only so many places you could put it. We could move to the north corner in the barrier-free access lane, but I don't know if our friends in Lansing would appreciate that.
Right.
So, and on another note regarding parking, I'm not convinced personally that you have the correct square foot factors, but the city administration seems to be content, so we'll drop that. I think you're underparked, but they seem to be okay with it, so I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. Now, your exterior materials. It still says 2x8 logs. What are they now? On the drawings, say 2x8 logs.
It's a flat panel, and when you knock down the color, this is probably a liquid stain on what the Tim has brought forth. It's
Okay.
a high-grade panel. It's not
Okay.
fake. It's not.
Is that the color of the stain?
This is the color as it sits right now. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody want to see it?
No, I'm good. I can see
It's
it.
not veneered, it's solid piece. Quality stuff.
Okay, so it's a 1-by material now, not a 2-by. Okay. Oh, Mr. Avinsky, I want to make a note that you served on this board a long time, very honorably, back when you were. You always made a big deal about drawings not being sealed. These drawings aren't sealed. The ones I have aren't sealed. Is that last month?
No, this is,
Oh, okay. I took it off the website, then I apologize. I took it off our website. Okay. I got it off the city council. You win. So, okay. Your elevations have, you've improved them. They've come a long way. We talked about the stain. That's not a Meadow Valley product anymore, is it? The wood? It was Meadow Valley. Okay. Okay. What's the function of the doors in the back now?
These are going to be beautiful. Glass panel roll-up 16. Sunshine. If you're an artist, you really appreciate northern sunlight. The south and the west is too harsh. It's diffused beautifully, and with the orientation of the building, it's ideal actually for utilizing that northern sunlight. So the more northern sunlight I can get, the better. I love the outdoors, and we just got back from Alaska a couple days ago, or about a week ago, and there's just something about being in the fresh air. And when you roll those puppies up, I mean, you got some beautiful flow and going on, and it's just going to be fantastic. And just, just pulling in. One door is going to be more universal for, backing in, loading up my van or my truck or a trailer with art that I'm going to bring back and forth to the gallery or even up north to the other studio. And the other one would probably be just fresh air. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that, of the 3 exposed elevations, I think the north elevation is improved vastly. I like the idea of the doors. I think that's it.
Well, we have to take in consideration of who we're facing to, and we have neighbors, and we start a resident right there. And the last thing I want to do is put up ugly metal doors and bins and fire doors and things that don't matter to the general public. But it's a 3-sided building, and every side should have quality design. And we're going to sink a lot of money into it. But it definitely is. It's going to be utilized. That's probably going to be the main entrance for people coming in and out, and for the employees at least. So we have to make it presentable. So even the back has to have curb appeal.
So when the doors are open, you're not going to have the stamping plant noises in there and things like that?
Unless paint on a brush on the canvas is loud, then that's probably as loud as I'll get.
Fair enough. I see the mezzanine is now called storage. Is that what the mezzanine is going to be used for?
It's a dry storage, a warm dry storage, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I know some of the fellow planning commissioners have some concerns about the elevations. Our ordinance, and it's for those of you keeping track, it's section 138-679. We have 6 things, findings, findings that we have to do. Number 4 says, and I'll read it here for everybody: site design, architecture, signs, orientation, and materials are consistent with the city's master plan objectives and the design of the neighboring sites and buildings. Now, we can talk about that. That's pretty vague comment. And as someone who does what Mr. Novinsky does for a living, I do the same thing. I could argue that either way. So, if people want to discuss that, but I just wanted to bring that up. That's what our ordinance says. The only other comment I have is, and I brought this up last month, and something I'd like the building department to add, is put the neighbor put the neighbor on notice that there's a building that's going to be a little taller than theirs being built. We run into this all the time. Building code does not address it, but it creates a potential drift load. And I don't know when these buildings were built. It doesn't mean they have eminent problems with their roof framing, but it's something that the building department should add or ask for, that they're put on notice that there's a development and it may impact the neighbor's roof. There's nothing they can do about it. His roof is his roof. Their building is their building. It's a property rights issue. They're entitled to improve their building. He's entitled to improve his. Should he have anticipated 80 years ago that there might be a taller building next to him? I don't know. But it's just something that I think would, if this gets approved, it should be one of the conditions that they are at least put on notice that there is a potential for impact.
Okay.
Okay.
I did speak with the building official about your concerns about the snowdrift, and he looked at them, and just based on the elevations that he saw, he didn't see that there would be a problem. But he did note that he would know better, especially when the construction renderings came in.
Okay.
So he is aware, and we'll make sure that
And there may not be a problem. It's not a whole lot taller, but from my personal experience, it can be an issue. And it's just something that we, not only this project, but other projects we should be aware of, and because it will happen again. These buildings are right next to each other.
Yep, and we'll make sure we'll put a note in that when the plans,
Okay.
construction plans come in.
Okay. Those are my comments I have. Anybody else? Anybody want to
I've got
discuss
a
our
couple
standards?
more questions. So the back doors, the garage doors, do you play music when you paint?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay. So then when those doors are open and you're working, your neighbors will hear music. Is it loud? I mean, what's your music volume?
Why,
When you're
why is it loud?
Well, I don't know. Is it at what level do you listen to music? I'm just thinking of your neighbors at this
Okay,
point.
well, that's a variable, depends on the song, depends on the band,
All
right?
right. All right,
But,
and then-
yeah, I would take into consideration, but that would be like the same as somebody moving into a house and saying how loud you
Yeah,
play
you're
your
right.
music
You're
to your
absolutely
neighbors.
right.
So,
And then the other question I have for you is, you were talking about how the perfect light for an artist is northern light.
sure,
So you have a western elevation here and a southern elevation.
right.
And a lot of windows on the southern elevation. How are you planning on treating those windows to make the lighting better for you
Well,
as an artist?
you got to remember, those windows will let in sunlight probably only in the wintertime because the sun's going to be much lower. So I don't think I'm going to be dealing with light in the summertime. It's going to be passing right over. So I'm golden right there. And on the west, you can see I don't have a lot of windows.
Pretty high, yeah. It's pretty
It is
lighting
pretty
the
high.
mezzanine, basically.
Right. Well, I'm going to have a lot more windows on the north, and
Right.
light is
Okay.
light. I can deal with light. I can put shades up or whatever. In fact,
Okay.
Mitch Moses, who has a place right across the street, I can get blinds from
I
him.
just want to make sure that you're not covering all that window with
Oh,
like.
Not really.
That's the last thing you have to worry about.
Okay.
It's going to
All
look
right.
tricked out.
Just
It's gonna
wanna
look
make
nice.
sure
Yeah,
of that.
Mr. Muir, I'd like to interrupt. You have an excessive amount of light on the south, which is fine,
Yeah.
as far as the planning commission is
Well, it's
concerned.
part of our
I mean,
ordinance.
light of the excessive amount of glass. South and west, you're doing art. You may want to treat that glass. Is that tinted glass? I thought we talked about this last month.
Yeah.
You probably really want to treat that glass because that's one big open space, and
yeah,
it's not recessed. There's no
I get you.
blinds. There's no.
No,
things.
I appreciate the concern,
Yeah.
but my turnaround in paintings is pretty darn quick, and I rarely have paintings sitting around for a period of time. I paint them, and then they're off to market. They're off on the ships, and they're gone.
Okay.
So the turnaround for canvas and exposed canvas is minimal.
Yeah, it's not only that, it's the HVAC system. You're going to fry in there with that much glass on a summer day.
Hopefully.
And,
Yeah, all right.
if that's what you want, yeah, it's up to you.
That's why I got big doors.
So just, excuse me,
Yeah.
consider tinting that glass. We don't want mirrored glass, I don't think we would like that. But we wouldn't mind a tint. I think that'd be important for your business.
Sure.
Also on the west
Yeah,
side being high, because your west sun is going to blast.
That's going to heat it up, right? I'm facing west right now,
absolutely.
and
South
I got
will
these.
too,
I
yeah.
got the blinds that you simply pull down, and it's just it'll jump that temperature in the studio 15 degrees
Easy.
in no time. Oh, big time.
Mr. Murad, I interrupted you. You said you had a
No,
couple
that was it.
comments.
That was it. It was about the
Trotto?
glass and the noise.
One last question, any signage on the building?
Not as of yet. I'm not really retail, but I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I may put, Red Cloud, the studio name, perhaps on the door, real cool graphics or something like that, but nothing that says tattoo or neon lights or anything like that. Can we do neon lights? That'd be pretty cool. It's mid-century modern.
I have no problem, Dan.
Isn't that where you want to go?
That pump
I wouldn't
playing
go-
glass,
yeah,
you put it
I-
behind.
Yeah, right, okay.
Mr. Chair,
Love neon.
I think that was an overstatement by the chair that mid-century modern is the only design aesthetic that is appropriate for Berkeley. The master plan, the current master plan as written, as well as the design guidelines for downtown, which haven't been formally adopted, but there was a tremendous amount of community input into those guidelines. There were multiple sessions. There was a fairly good showing of people. There was some good consensus built on those. They're not that specific. We don't want to get that far into the weeds on them, but they do talk about kind of a historic aesthetic. So this deviates from that. So that's what gives me a bit of pause. I like it better than the last version. I mean, I liked the first version. I just didn't like it on 12 Mile in Berkeley, I mean, to be frank. And our charter, as the current chair, the temporary chair, noted, is that we have to consider the design aesthetics. There's been an awful lot of conversations that I've had with people who think that our opinions should not be part of it. It should meet code, and that's it. And that is actually not in our ordinance. Our ordinance is specific that we have to consider all of those things. So when we provide that, we provide a historic and an institutional knowledge of the area and things that wrongs that have been made in the past, so we are making a precedence here. But I think it is a better design for that part of downtown, or that part of the 12 Mile district than it was. So mid-century modern isn't necessarily what it had to be, but so that's all. That's
Gotcha.
it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we get a lot of projects through here, and rarely do I get a lot of comments about the aesthetics of a project. Had a lot about this one. And it's 50-50 down the middle. Half the people say, how dare you say they can't put up a log cabin in Berkeley? And the other half says, how could you possibly approve that on 12 Mile Berkeley?
Yeah.
So, we're between a rock and a hard place with the residents of our
Or
town.
you can be safe and just be white bread and just like everybody likes.
That
right,
could be
exactly.
a possibility
Right.
too.
That's not fair. It doesn't. That's
I
not
understand.
fair.
I understand. But my point is that I have heard a lot of comments about this, and it's just anecdotal,
Right, sure.
about this project, more so than, I've been doing this a long time, more so than most of the projects that we've had. So people have seen the rendering, and people feel very strongly about it both ways.
Yeah, I feel like I'm right on cue because how we value diversity right now, I mean, it's the biggest thing right now, and adversity, and this brings diversity, if you will, in a positive change. Somebody may look at it as a negative, but aren't we all supposed to be tolerant and, accepting of everybody and designs? Now, I get you, we don't want to go too crazy. We don't want to make it look like, a New England or a castle or anything like that, or a bubble or a hobbit house. Maybe we do, I don't know. But this is a long part. This is a variable that's creative, and sure, I guess we could paint the cinder block that's there and maybe actually just move in. But I mean, I don't want that, and I don't think you guys want that. So I think I'm bringing something to the table, and it may not be for everybody. She may like pancakes, and you may hate pancakes. It doesn't mean pancakes are good or bad. So.
Well, speaking good or bad, you are getting a lot of interest.
Good.
So that's
You know
probably
what? It's got
good.
people talking about Berkeley. Isn't that a great
No,
thing?
that is
Yeah.
it's a good thing for you.
Sure.
Most people say we love to have an art studio in town, but that elevation, I mean, that's just what I've heard. So, and
We'll get
I'm not
over it.
making a judgment,
Yeah.
but it is 50-50
Yeah.
each way. So,
Garbage. Are you going to have a dumpster? How's the garbage?
That is a great question. You know what? I don't produce a whole lot. If anything, it's probably just cardboard, that shipments that I get from canvases, and then I recycle those. I don't know, Joe, is there something that we have to deal with? I mean, for designating a dumpster or something like that? Right now in Birmingham, I got a couple of 55-gallon drums that I fill up, and then there's a universal, the CAM covers the dumpster cost, and it's probably about a half a block away, and I just dump it there. But I don't know anything about the zoning and the coordinates for the dumpster.
I don't think there's a need for it. After watching his operations and talking to him, we have a little corner in the back of the corner of the building where it's recessed. It's undercover, actually, for the cardboard refuse. It's a perfect place to put a movable garbage can. That's what they're doing now. Lucy is doing exactly that right now in that very corner. It's working for her for all these years. It'll work for these guys well. We don't have the room for a gated and fenced dumpster.
Okay.
We don't have the room for a dumpster. So, I don't think there's a need for it. After watching his operations and talking to him, we have a little corner in the back of the corner of the building where it's recessed. It's undercover, actually, for the cardboard refuse. It's a perfect place to put a movable garbage can. That's what they're doing now. Lucy is doing exactly that right now in that very corner. It's working for her for all these years. It'll work for these guys well. We don't have the room for a gated and fenced dumpster.
That's fine.
Thanks.
I'm fine with that.
Good question.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have another question. So I'm looking at the drawings here, and on one of the documents we received in regards to parking, it lists the mezzanine square footage, let me find it here, as 575 usable square feet. Yet the drawing says it's 1,045 or 44 square feet of mezzanine. So which number's right?
When we first did this project, I had a very, I think, eloquent and detailed interior spatial divisions between use for only one reason, to demonstrate the fact that it is a building that's serving a multi-use with sales and product and storage in it, and multi-use. And so those components have different categories for parking, as we probably know. I was shocked when the owner said, I want one space. I said, I can't do that. It's going to jack your parking out of the sky. You got to show all the things that you're really doing there. Don't trick them. Show them the truth. Give them the real numbers. I want one space. I do all of it out of one space. Okay. I took my calculator out, and lo and behold, my parking calculations went down with the 70% gross numbers, 70% calculations verified by your planner. We don't have a parking problem here. It is far from that, and it meets the ordinance to the letter of the law with the 70% coefficient that we employ universally from the gross aggregate. Tim did it. We did it. Our new Aaron did it. The math is the math. We don't have a large number of people showing up for any reason. If there is a group, it's being bussed in from afar. It's not a congregate space. It's not an assembly use. We don't need that type of parking here. And they've got a really, really friendly neighbor across the street that always has a couple spaces. Look out.
Okay, any more comments from the Planning Commission? Okay, I think at this point, we'd like to ask the audience if there's anybody out there who would like to speak on this project. Please step up to the microphone, state your name, your city of residence.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Marone. I am the resident of the property 3446 Prairie Avenue, directly to the north, right there. The reason I came tonight is just to ask the city if we've had an opportunity to review the lot line between the commercial lot and the property right there to ensure that there would be adequate privacy and noise reduction.
Right now, if I'm not mistaken, it talks about the existing 6-foot high privacy fence. It's a wood fence.
Is that on the commercial property, or?
It says it's an existing fence. I can't tell from this site plan. It looks like it's right on top of the property line. It's hard to tell from the drawing, and I have a smaller drawing than everybody else apparently.
So that fence is part of the original fence that was put on the previous homeowner. There's part of the permit, I believe, that was put in for the house that I own. I'd like to ask that the city and Joe Novinsky kindly review that, and not just because this property looks great, but I would like you to consider future property or future owners of this property. And because you have the large doors on the back, it appears to me that this could be both an indoor and outdoor type facility. Noise could be louder. I have a young daughter there, so I'd just like to ensure that there's some privacy there. My recommendation would be that a stone wall or a brick wall would be put in, consistent with the design guidelines that Berkley has in other areas of the city where we are separating the commercial and residential lots. And so my only ask is that you review that, and if it's consistent with the other areas, then we do something there kindly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a
Mr.
question
Merritt.
of the resident?
Oh,
Sure, yeah.
can you come back up?
Sir, can you step back up for a second here? So, having visited the site and then looking on the drawing, the fence that's there now doesn't, like, in a lot of times where there's a commercial next to property next to a residential and they're doing a development, we have them build a wall.
Yeah.
Okay, and code I think is 6 feet, right? If I'm not
Yes.
I
mistaken.
believe so.
On 11
So-
mile it is anyways.
In your case, your driveway's right there. I'd hate to see a 6-foot wall going all the way to the sidewalk. Are you okay if that wall was stepped down?
I think we're required to step them down.
Yeah, I think we are too. I just want you to make sure that, because right now it ends at right around your house, at the front of your
Right,
house.
right.
So-
So I mean, there's a part of it is functional, right? It serves a purpose of privacy.
Correct.
It serves a purpose of noise reduction. It also, if they do have a dumpster, I have a commercial lot on the other side of me, and I have a dumpster on one side of my house that's like 2 feet from my backyard, and then I'm going to have another one over here.
Right.
So with those, maybe it's not art, but it could be that the next owner has something else there.
Right.
And it could be food.
Yep.
And then there's a problem. I've been here for 15 years. So to keep the animals out, or at least reduced, the brick walls serve a little
Right.
bit
Okay.
better. I would also ask that if there's any way we can preserve the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood. Sometimes I think the masonry walls, they don't look as good or
Right.
as a brick. That's just an ask. That being said, yes, in terms of it tapering down, you have to consider I have to back out of the driveway,
Right.
so there has
Yeah.
to be visibility there.
And your daughter could be riding a bicycle out to the sidewalk. And
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but that's part of it too, as I am looking at this as, we do have young children, and I'm trying to separate, I think the building looks great. I think it's a wonderful addition to the neighborhood. I think it's going to add value and certainly look a little bit nicer than what we have there today. So that's great. But I also want to make sure that if somebody else comes in there, depending on the type of business it is, that the children are kind of separated from the crowds that go into whatever these buildings are.
And then also recognize that where their property line ends is where that wall would end. So you'd still have partial brick wall and then a wood fence.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that my thought was that Joe is a very good architect, from what I understand, and that if the city and Joe could come together to present some options.
Okay.
I think it's more in keeping.
Joe?
We see these all the time. The masonry walls between the commercial and I have one next to my house. I love my wall. It's not clear to me that we'll get an easy application for an easement for a masonry wall. So I don't want to say, oh yeah, we can do that. Try to get DTE to do anything these days. I've watched a building go up around a telephone pole on Woodward recently. We can say that we would try, but I think more importantly, I think that the neighbors should decide what they want to do. A little tiny piece of step-down brick wall next to a fence that's tired doesn't have any appeal to me as a neighbor, doesn't have any appeal to these folks as owners. So let's do one fence, step it down appropriately, come up with a material that we all agree to. If we can do masonry, I don't think you're going to kick about masonry. Owners? No, they won't. And just, we'll give we'd like to do a new fence to the edge of our property. We can't go beyond.
Right.
As I talked to Ryan earlier, that's going to make a disparity between where our wall stops, as somebody just said. Our wall's going to stop at the edge of our property, and he's got to continue on around the next 3 sides of his lot. I don't know where that spot is. I didn't look for it. But I can tell you this, we did have a conversation about the barrier. So I'm one of those kids that got hit coming around a solid wall when I was a kid on my buddy's brand new bike. It was a sad story. However, they're dangerous. Stepping it down is imperative. We've all decided that years ago.
Yeah.
It's in the ordinance. I don't know how effective it's going to be there for the doors. It won't be. We usually take them to the front of the buildings, and then it steps down. That's how far it goes now. It goes to the front of his building and then just cuts off.
Yep.
We'd put up a 30 incher for the rest of the way. Okay. I don't think either are going to complain about that. Yeah, I don't know how much value that extra 30 inches is going to have, though. So I'm just saying, I don't think you have a contest here. What we have to do is decide how we can move forward, because I'm not convinced I can get an easement agreement. That's a 10-foot easement. I think that's a utility corridor. There's primary back there. That's not just secondary. So I'm on that line too. And I got a 6-foot wall. I don't know how they did it. Across the street. I don't know. I don't see one up and down that whole corridor. They're wood fences. So, whatever the board here really believes that we can accomplish, let's accomplish it. I believe in good fences, and I believe in good neighbors. And I think everybody here talking does too. There's no contest. What does the board choose to help us achieve?
Just so you know, it's not primary, and it is only low voltage.
Good. Okay.
It's
Well,
communication wires.
maybe we can get it. Maybe we can get it. Are you a utility guy?
Electrical contractor. But you're looking at
Can we get?
TNT or Comcast, but I mean, as for the easement, I don't even know if there's an easement there. We had to look at
It's
what
not
the city-
recorded.
Probably not.
It's not recorded, but neither is the one on
Easements
my
along
house.
north and south along behind the houses. That's something looks like the low voltage guy just threw up over the last 30 years, and it's still there.
Okay, so you're convinced that we can do masonry?
I can't say yes or no, but I'm just looking at it saying that I don't know if it's got an easement or not. So that would be your call to figure out if it's an easement or not.
You want to agree to that if we can do it?
Sure.
Okay, sure. Please don't make us come back again.
Would anybody else like to speak, please?
Charles Terrell from Berkley. The conversation earlier about opinions and design aesthetic, I've never been able to find that in the code. Can somebody cite the section of the code where that is?
Marty, you did read it. It's section 138, 679,
Part of our 6 standards.
subpart 4.
Subpart 4. Yep.
And what does that say about opinions and
Doesn't say opinions.
what does it say?
It says site
Says-
design, I'll quote.
Read it.
Unless Ms. Buckler. you
No,
wanna
read it.
Site design, architecture, signs, orientation, materials are consistent. This is something we have to find, so it's in
Right,
that
yeah.
context. Are consistent with the city's master plan objectives and the design of the neighboring sites and buildings.
Okay.
That's what it says.
And then we refer back to the master plan, and there's language about this, the east end and the west end of 12 Mile and what the objectives are, and then the city as a whole. There's like, I think 8 pages of descriptors, and they don't get, and as I said, they don't get exactly in the weeds on you must have this and you must have that. They don't go as far as the design guidelines, which are not adopted, I understand, but again, a lot of time went into them, so they can't completely be ignored because there's a lot of community input into those, and they are in draft.
It was not universally beloved.
No, but neither is a master plan, and neither is any
But a
decision
master plan,
by
but the
this-
master plan is approved.
Yeah, so
there's
this is the
the
master
difference.
plan. So the
But we're
master plan
also-
talks about the historic, and
Right, right.
it does talk about an aesthetic.
Right,
And
but what
so
but
our
what
opinion does matter in this case, because we're
Well-
interpreting the master plan.
But then I hear things like, how loud will your music be during the day? There's noise ordinances.
Yes, there
There
are
are.
You can
noise
deal with noise
ordinances, and whenever we
And
reviewed.
the noise
when-
ordinances are for after a certain time,
Correct.
not during the day.
But we've also, when we review drive-throughs that have a speaker,
Yeah.
we've considered how loud will that speaker be to impact the residents.
Then I guess my reason for being here is I think you're getting off into the weeds and you're getting away from the real charter of what you're supposed to be doing by asking things like, how loud will that speaker be? If the staff reviewed it and it meets the noise ordinances, then that's how loud it can be.
I agree.
But so That's all in the documentation that you have, that he's going to have his doors open and he'll be playing music while he creates his art. Okay, as long as it's not too loud. If it's too loud, code enforcement will be there and or public safety will be there to turn down the music. Just like when neighbors brought out electric guitars at 3 a.m. They came and fixed that. So again, that's not really part of planning and looking at what a building is, how it's going to be. To me, that's just off in the weeds. I will take your citation and I will go back and reread that over and over until I better understand. But again, I don't think that opinion has a place in all of this.
Thank you.
Well, and I'd like to answer on the idea of,
Ms.
you
Butler.
said very good that planning. So this building will exist beyond the applicant, God willing. And it is within our purview to ask these questions, one, so that the applicant is aware that they are not in a silo, that they're part of a neighborhood. And two, so it does create an opportunity for him not to create additional conflict within the neighborhood. So yes, noise is an issue, lighting is an issue. We hear about it even when it does meet code, because neighbors, by and large, don't like change. People like what they have. They don't like when a new house goes in next door. They don't like when a streetscape changes. And so it's one of those things that we think we should ask as part of the planning process. So, and it's not an opinion, it's merely just asking the question, has it been considered? And there's things they can do to ameliorate it if they haven't considered it as part of the process. And we don't look at noise on every single project because it isn't relevant on every project. So that's it.
Thank you.
If I may, I'll make it brief. The acting chair sometimes tests my patience with extensive questions about the interior of structures and the building materials, and these questions many times go beyond the strict letter of our mandate. But I understand what he's trying to do. I think anybody that seeks approval of this city to construct something, to remodel something, should know about problems as soon as possible in the process.
See, though, that's just...
Excuse me.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I thought you were done, I'm sorry.
You couldn't have thought I was done, but you'll have an adequate opportunity to respond. So to finish my thought, our underlying mandate is to assure quality construction, in lasting construction, value construction in this city. Projects that will outlast us, yes. And to do that, we sometimes do. We do go a little farther than our mandate would, strictly speaking, call for. But I think we have to act with common sense. So that's my comment.
Well, see, that's exactly my point, is that you are going beyond the mandate. And I think it needs to be dialed back to the mandate. And that any time that you go beyond the mandate, that's just wrong. And that's not why we're here.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Does anybody here have a motion to make?
I can make it.
Because I can't.
I would like to make the motion to approve site plan review SP 0519 with the issue of the fence, I don't know how to word that, being resolved by city staff.
So there's more than that needs to be in there.
That's what I need to say.
Our new planner has a list of 5 items that following conditions.
1 is done, 2 is done.
1 is done, 2 is done, cross
3 is
that
done,
off.
4 is done, 5 is still pending.
And the pending review and approval of city engineer
Right.
and Department of Public Works, once that's completed. And put the neighbor on notice
regarding,
regarding the structure being adjusted and their roof.
regarding, yeah, potential, I'm not really supposed to say that.
No, that's
Potential drifting,
potential drifting.
just in case, yes.
And the masonry wall, if can.
Oh, you can't read my writing. We talked, if I may, we talked about a masonry screen wall if we can achieve an easement. So I'd like to, well, we have a motion, and that was one of the other items on here. Do I have a second?
Support.
Okay, any discussion on the items? We have 3 conditions. I'll repeat them, because I can read my writing sometimes. Review and approve from the City Engineer, Department of Public Works. Put the neighbor on notice that there may be an issue with snow drifting. And then third, the masonry screen, install masonry screen wall per our ordinance if we can achieve an easement, get an easement.
And if I may address the motion.
Discussion, please.
Yeah, thank you. The ordinance requires us to make findings of fact, so I'm not sure I need to move to amend the motion or anything, but I would request that once the formal language is settled upon, that it state that we have made fact findings regarding the relevant portions of the ordinance that we have to make.
Yep.
Can we get that into the minutes? Thank you.
Well put.
Thanks for the help.
Any discussion on the motion? Anybody? Roll call.
Buckler,
Yes.
Murad,
No.
Richardson,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. Good luck.
Before we move to the next case, if I could ask, there's been a little bit of disturbance. If you could move your cell phones away from any wires. There's been some static.
Okay. Item number 2, our next item is we have 2 parts, a public hearing and a conditional rezoning request. Same project. So, Ms. Schlutout, will you read the next item, please?
So this is a public hearing to review the matter for a rezoning application at 3339 Cummings Avenue. And I'd like to reference my August 10th letter, if I may. So this is for case number PRZ-02-19. The applicant, Atex Builders LLC, is being represented by Grant Doirage, and he's been before the Planning Commission previously. He was here November 27th of 2018, wherein he was requesting a conditional rezoning for the entire property at 3339 Cummings, which included Lot 114 and the south 20 feet of Lot 113 in the subdivision. What's unique about his revision of his request is that he is no longer requesting to rezone the south 20 feet of Lot 113. So he's only looking to do the entirety of Lot 114, which is where the house is. The house would be then removed, and it would be reconstructed and developed with a conforming structure to the R1D standards. The applicant is requesting the conditional rezoning from parking to the R1D, single-family residential. The review procedures set forth in Chapter 138, Article 6, Division 3, the Planning Commission must hold a public hearing and then make a recommendation to City Council. And there are a number of review considerations that the Planning Commission must undertake for the finding of fact. And the first one is to review the existing property within the general area of the property in question. So if you look at page 3, I have noted the where the property is and then the existing land uses surrounding lot 114. So they are primarily single-family residence and parking. Number 2, the zoning classification of the property within the general area of the property in question. So the properties to the east and the west, east and the south of the subject property are zoned R1D. This would follow suit with the rezoning of lot 114. They would be compatible in zoning with surrounding zoning patterns. Number 3, the suitability of the property in question to the uses permitted under the existing zoning classification. Demolition of the existing structure and the new construction of the single-family home would continue the residential character of the neighborhood. The residential uses are not currently permitted in the parking district, so the existing structure is classified as a non-conforming structure. By rezoning the property into the R1D, you would then be removing a non-conforming structure in that zoning district. Number 4, the trend of development, if any, in the general area of the property in question, including any changes in which have taken place in the present zoning classification. Berkley is going through a lot of redevelopment, as you know, so the trend to demolish the post-World War II single-family homes have generally been removed and then replaced with a more modern 2-story structure, and that's what the applicant is proposing to do. Since 2011, there have been 2 other properties in the surrounding neighborhood that have followed this trend and have been redeveloped. Currently, the building department has 4 other building permit applications in the same surrounding area, so this is something that would follow the current trend that is going on in the neighborhood. Number 5, the objectives of the current master plan for the city. This is where the Planning Commission has some, has to review the master plan in terms of where the designation of the mixed use and the single family land use categories are aligned, because the current master plan does not delineate between the mixed use and the single family. So it's up to the determination of the Planning Commission if they want to review and note one or the other if they fit. The mixed-use designation in the master plan allows for the intent of the district is to promote the complementary mixture of uses that will support downtown, provide opportunity to new businesses. Single-family residential, multifamily residential is included in that mixed-use classification, and then the parking would support that. In summary, I would just like to say that the applicant, with the conditional rezoning agreement, the applicant is proposing that if the lot 114 has been rezoned as R1D, then the south 20 feet of the lot 113 would then remain as parking and could be developed as parking. At the November 27, 2018 meeting, the question of the parking district was a big point of discussion for the Planning Commission, and this would allow part of that area to still be developed as parking.
I think it's parking already. There's a wall around it and everything.
The north 20 feet of lot 113 is currently used as parking. The south 20 feet is still a part of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And that's in line with the what was the playground equipment for, okay.
And with that, I'll take any questions.
Well, no, it's a public hearing, so.
Yes, public hearing first. If anybody would like to speak, please do it this time. Come to the microphone. As usual, state your name and your town residence.
I guess I'm the applicant, so I'd like to state my name, Grant Drivage. I'm out of Royal Oak. I bought the property. Saw you guys about I'd say a little under a year ago. I've kind of, over the last year, we've tried to kind of get something together with this property, kind of make it move forward. The existing property's in not good shape. I mean, I could go back to the discussion about it being a rental and turning, and rehabbing it, but I know, speaking with the neighbors, and in the packet, there's all the neighbors signed off on what was going on. We have gone back and talked back and forth in regards to a little bit, and it was probably Aaron getting here, but I talked with the previous planning director, Tim, about, it going all to a 60-unit municipal spot, and with that 20 feet being bought, as it would make sense, that however there was some kind of layout that could have been done with that because of the alley, and there were some of the commercial business owners that were in support of that. I know the neighbors next door, and I know it goes back to one neighbor versus the whole neighborhood, but I know the neighbors next door, Paul Knapp and his wife, which aren't here, but, I know one of their big concerns is that the whole lot turns into parking, in terms of changes the value of their property, so.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I guess we close the public hearing. It's 8:01.
It's the applicant. Well,
So we move on to the actual conditional rezoning.
So usually the applicant comes up and does a presentation, and then we ask.
I think he did.
Well, that was during the public
Which is
hearing,
fine.
so I think he needs to come back to the
Come on.
microphone so we can ask him questions.
Yeah.
And I have some questions, Mr. Chair.
Question away.
All right. So, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name again?
Drivage.
Mr. Drivich, okay. So your new lot would be 5,232 square feet? Yes? That's 40 feet times 130.81 feet?
If that's the way the math works
Yeah,
out.
that's,
good.
I don't know. I relied on my iPhone for the math, but I'm pretty sure that's about where we are. So, 4 times 13 is 20. Yeah, so 13, 20. Yeah, but good. So, the maximum space, or the maximum lot cover that you can have for structures is 1,831 feet. So you've proposed a 3,000 square foot house, which, unless you have some kind of overhang.
That was the maximum. Isn't it 35% lot coverage?
35% lot coverage. So of that, 35% of 5,232 is 1,831 square feet.
That's per floor? I'm saying.
That's per structure. So that includes your garage and your house.
All right.
And I don't know that it includes a porch, but it includes a permanent stoop, I think, if there was a stoop on it. And we spent a lot of time on the difference between a porch and a stoop in this in this body. So I'm just going through the numbers. So so you can check them. So that would be a 1,500 square foot floor plan, unless you're having some kind of overhang to get to your 3,000 square feet. Let me finish. That leaves you 331 square feet for a garage, which is a 20 by 16 garage at best, give or take, which is a car and a half. Like, you might be able to get 2 cars in there, but you're never going to put a rake or a bicycle in there. And a 3,000 square foot house isn't going to live with a 1-car garage. I'm
Right.
just suggesting.
Well, and I threw those numbers as rough numbers, but the 35% coverage is the lot coverage itself. So if you have 1,000 square foot and then 1,000 square foot on top of it, you'd essentially have 1,000 square foot.
Right. So you have 1,000 square foot house. So you can have 2,000. You can't count the basement in your square footage. We don't, because you'd have to have some kind of escape to do that. So that's fine if you want to do it that way and have less. It takes up more room from your first floor and reduces your floor space on that. So at the end of the day, you're going to put a very big house on a very small lot. And I live on a 40-foot lot, so I get it. And you still need a, minimum, 12-foot drive, or 9-foot driveway, I think it is, or 10-foot driveway, something like that, so a car can get back there, or a bigger car. So you don't try to drive a Silverado down my driveway. I think it's like 8.5 feet. And then there'll be a fence, of course, that will, of course, take up some space. So I just think your house size is going to be really large for what you proposed. I also still, and Chair, Mr. Chair, I still have the same heartburn that I had the last time you brought this forth. I think it's interesting that you want to peel off the 20 feet. That's great. It matches the other one. But this entire lot was zoned parking for a reason. There was a vision of that back in 1986. And I don't think that vision has changed for that end of the city. There is there is real potential in the structures that are along there, and that parking would go a long way. It adds to the properties across Cummins because that's not a major road, so it could provide parking all along that 12-mile corridor where we're lacking. And so that's it. I'm done.
Thank you. Ms. Buckler? Anybody else?
I have a question. It might be a staff question.
Ms. Kempner?
How many parking spots would this allow for? Do you have any clue?
Just based on an aerial, anywhere from 15 to 20.
I didn't hear that.
It looked like about 15 to 20.
Well, he's
Oh, just for the 20-foot strip?
130
Yeah.
feet, so about 14.
14, yeah.
14 wide,
How are you going to get to them?
give or take.
Well, they reconfigured that.
Well,
They could
that's a
reconfigure
different
that.
matter
Depends
altogether.
if they're zip, 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 or...
Right now,
There's-
there is a 20-foot space for parking. By adding 20 feet to it, I don't know what you really gain as far as potential parking. There's no room for a drive or anything.
Have to be a fishbone.
If this were to move forward, there have been some discussions about merging those two parking lots and redeveloping it as
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I have a question for staff.
Mira?
The lot to the west that has the play structure, is that owned by city or is that privately owned?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Police structures are gone.
I think
Yeah,
that's the
well,
Doll
It
Hospital.
was.
Yeah, it was
Was
a
the
Doll
Doll
Hospital.
Hospital?
But I think it's still owned by the same owner. He didn't sell the building, did he?
Yeah, I don't think the city purchased that property,
No.
but we could be wrong.
So does the city own the
Does the
first
city
20
manager
feet?
know?
Does the city own this?
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Matt Baumgarten, city manager. Adding some context to this, the parking lot that you were citing that was formerly half held, the playground equipment was sold in the deal where gatekeepers actually purchased their property, and so it's now held by gatekeepers.
Okay, so the city does not own that.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And adding some context to this request, we've been in discussions with ATEX on combining not only the 20 feet strip here, the 20 feet to the north, essentially recombining lot 113 and matching it with the lot owned by gatekeepers as well, adding it to that with a 20-foot alleyway that the city does currently own. You've got a space that's about 60 feet by about 260, and we were looking to combine those into a lot to satisfy the 1986 vision of adding parking to the West 12 area of town. What we would like to proceed with is trying to do this without at the cost of a home, basically. And so this is a step that we would need in order to be able to proceed in negotiations and conversations with the two privately held parking owners at this point. So if we don't have that squared out box that we're looking for here, it puts us behind the eight ball in trying to assemble these properties into a parking lot.
So I have a question for the city manager, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Is that reflected in the conditional rezoning agreement? Because I didn't see mention of the contingency on the other two lots.
No, the conditions are put forth by the applicant, not by the city, and so it's in context. The city is not in control of those conditions, so and nor can we suggest them to the applicant, or nor can we mandate them to the applicant. I'm sorry.
Well, you can mandate whatever you want in a conditional rezoning agreement. So,
The applicant drives the
applicant
conditions.
drives.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
drives.
it does, okay.
Can't drag a third party.
We're not gonna-
We learned that a couple months
All
ago.
right, okay,
with
very
lots
good.
of
Very good.
Our last one.
that. Mr.
You
Baumgarten,
just not signed it then.
looking ahead, and I know the city doesn't control the property to the west, but looking ahead, it looks to me like where the parking is now, that row of parking would become the drive. And then we would put a strip of parking along the new line that we're asking, the south 20 feet, and a strip of parking north against the buildings. And that would be a very efficient parking lot should all these things come into play.
Correct, sir.
That is the
And-
long-term.
Correct. We're looking at two different potential options as far as laying it out. There is a utility pole that would be
course.
could be brought into consideration there, but we're looking at exactly that model
or looking at a service access that would leave the parking in the center, likely angled parking that would be accessed by a like interior circular drive.
Okay.
That's less efficient, to your point, but if we're unable to overcome some utility issues, then it's our next best option.
But in an ideal world, that'd be an incredible parking lot for that area. A lot of parking.
Yeah, we believe it'll be great for that section of town, for sure.
Yeah.
An area that certainly struggled with parking up to this point.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Question.
No, go ahead.
Who currently owns the north side of the existing lot 13?
The property owner who purchased the middle section, or the end section of Gatekeepers, on here it's property ending in 027. If you have the
I'm just saying,
overhead
if
aerial
this
view.
ends up being the case, the city could end up building a 25 or 20-foot piece of land that is literally locked between a parking lot and a house.
Yes, sir.
But just owning a piece of strip of land for 20 feet. Now, has there been any agreements made with any of the other local facilities that are over there to what's going to happen with this parking lot and how this is going to be put together as a community parking lot?
So we're beginning
It's
to
going to be another parking lot in the city of Berkeley that has a bunch of signs in it. If you park in my parking lot, I'm going to tow your car. That's my question. I don't want to see another parking lot end up where you have a angry owner telling you can't park there.
Nor do I. Like I say, but if we're to proceed any farther, we need to know if this is even a viable option. We are working with a company who's hopefully helping us assemble this deal with the various property owners, whether it's an ownership with the other two or whether it's we have an agreement in place. But ideally, we would own this and operate it and maintain it as a public parking lot.
That's good.
Yeah, I know kind of an example of what you're talking about, and I don't want to see it repeated that way either. Parking fiefdoms are some of the reasons why we see some of our lots being underused. And so in order to get the most maximum amount of parking possible, we do prefer, in this case, public ownership.
And then you're obligated to city.
The question comes up is in the agreement between Atex Builders and the city for rezoning. Are they giving you a good deal on this thing? Because they don't spell out what the terms of the property ownership, changing of the property ownership is. They just say the fair market value.
That's what we were looking for, is a fair market value.
Giving them a pretty good scenario here, considering the circumstances. I think fair market value would be just handing it over to the city. But that's not my call.
Yeah, and the property owner may disagree on that particular item.
Well, then I can disagree on rezoning them.
Yeah, well, in this scenario, like say, he either has, again, he has a 60-foot property. He's not interested necessarily. Commercial property, commercial parking doesn't add to the value of the home here. Overall, and not to make this case for him, but being that this is owned parking, it does limit his uses on this property. It does limit the redevelopment potential there as well. We think, when we've been discussing with him on the case to be made here for combining the commercial lots into a parking area, allowing a redeveloped home to remain part of the neighborhood there is our best first option, which is what brings us before you today.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson.
Okay. Nothing in the conditional rezoning obligates the city to purchase the property. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
And so you're not going to find yourself in a situation where you've got an island on your hands. I trust. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
I don't believe that'll be the outcome.
Okay. And yet, if you do not exercise the option, the property the 20 feet will remain zoned parking and non-buildable, correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay. The mention was made in the November meeting about a parking study that was underway and had not been completed, as I understand it, a DDA parking study for covering that area of town. Is that?
The DDA did do a parking study in the course of its downtown master plan. That's done, the results of which are in the draft document posted on the city's website and the DDA's website.
Okay, and you've at least strongly implied that achieving your overall goal here of assembling a parking lot would be adequate to meet the needs for business parking in that stretch of 12 Mile. Are you saying then that your plan is consistent with the DDA's parking study?
I would say it's consistent with it, and it's also consistent with the intent on rezoning this property back in the mid-'80s as well.
Okay, so basically, we're not, at least you're representing that we're not changing the vision or the existing plan with respect to rezoning this property, and you anticipate that it will be a plus for that section of 12 Mile. Would that be fair?
Yes, sir. I think this would have a very high yield for the businesses in that area. If you recall, not only this board, but the zoning board has had questions in front of them on businesses along the stretch that, unfortunately, there was no choice but to deny it, just based on the facts of the case and a situation where it was lack of parking there.
Okay.
So I do believe this would be, again, just trying to set some context to the request here, in addition to community development director's note as well.
Thank you.
I personally think that a lot of pieces have to fall into place.
Yes, sir.
But in a perfect world, should this happen, we're going to get 50, 60 parking spaces here. If it goes all the way from between the two streets, if we can double park that strip, and that's a win-win for everybody. A lot has to happen. This is probably the first step.
Yes, yeah, that's correct, sir.
Thank you.
If I may, just to add on, I don't know how to count the parking spaces quite as fast as you do, but we also have a developer.
I made it up.
We also have a developer that wants to put a house there, a buffer, if you will, that the new owner, if he decides to sell it, will then know what they're getting as far as their neighbor as a parking lot, as opposed to the one who lives next to this lot who didn't maybe necessarily know that was a parking lot potentially next to him. So I think you have a developer who wants to develop the land, and the city, or we have the option for a parking lot there, and it'll put the buffer for the neighborhood. That also is a win for the neighbors in the neighborhood there. So I think I like this idea. I liked it last time. It was narrow last time. I still like it, so that's all.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Murad?
if I recall correctly, the property owner to the west of this, that piece of property was also zoned parking.
Mm-hmm.
It's a residence now.
I think it's an existing home.
So I would suggest
On
that
the
if
parking.
this plan all comes together, we go and rezone that piece of property back to R1.
That's probably a few steps away.
Yeah, a few steps away, but I'm just putting it out there for in the future. If this
Should this
passes
come.
tonight, that lot to the west be considered for a rezoning in the future. Something may be initiated by the city as this whole thing progresses. So,
Mr. Baumgartner, anything else to add?
No, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
You. Anybody else?
One question. If
Mr.
this
Trout?
does go through as a rezoning, how do we get the terms and conditions in so that it...
It's a conditional rezoning.
Conditional rezoning, okay.
Already in there.
All right, just want to confirm.
Mr. Patterson, did you have something else you want to say?
No.
I do have one question.
Oh, Ms. Buckley.
I have one question. So, disregarding the 20 feet to the north, what precludes the owner from doing a simple renovation of the current structure, new siding, interior renovation, without a new footprint? There's nothing in its current zoned as parking that would preclude that from happening. If the concern is you want a nicer house, and that seems to be the neighbor's concern as well, what precluded you from doing that in the first place?
Structurally, the house is unsound. And if you've been in the house, I mean, the basement walls are, on the one side, are caving in to an extent. It's not really conforming. It doesn't even conform really to the Berkley bungalows that are in the neighborhood. You know, if you're trying to conform and you could do something nicer, but the problem with it is, say I do fix the house up, you can't split the 20 feet off. So say in 10 years from now, you guys want or 2 years or next year, you want the 20 feet, it's like 4 feet from the lot line. So you can't even, so it'll be completely a non-conforming structure. So you can never take that 20 feet off the lot, because it's won't even fit in an existing R1D standard, even if you wanted to zone it back to R1D. you know. Plus, it's selling, you know, it's lipstick on a pig. You sell a house to somebody, which I obviously now have to disclose, because I know about it now, with being parking. So, but the next homeowner buys a house and their house burns down, they can never rebuild. The same goes for the neighbor to the west. They can never rebuild their house, you know, which that actually was an existing house, but with the previous planning, I don't know what happened with the building department, but the previous planning, they actually let them go out and up with that house. So they let them renovate and do a large addition on that house, which this house isn't an option now because, you know, we had submitted brand new plans, and in my personal opinion, building on an existing foundation is just a bad practice, and eventually it's going to catch up with you. I mean, could it be renovated? Probably, but I don't see a benefit of renovating it for you guys or renovating it for me. You know, it's one of those situations. It's, you know, we renovate the house, that 20 feet is going to be a bear to have sold off, you know, because you won't be able to split the house off without a huge process, you know, of getting a variance for the 4 feet that it's, because you need a 5 foot offset.
Yeah, it's 3'7" inches.
It's 3'7" inches. So.
What's a variance?
No, that's the old. This
Okay,
is the
thank
old,
you.
This is the existing.
Mr. Kent, you've been quiet tonight.
No, I just think it offers a win-win for both parties, and I think it's a reasonable expectation of both, and it is conditional, so we'll see how it goes. And as the chair said tonight, it is the first step.
Anybody else? Anybody here? Do we have a motion?
Never read my screen, so
Struggled last time.
I'll do it.
I've been struggling.
I've struggled real hard last time.
Let me get back to
Be shy.
page 1 here. So this is going to be a motion to recommend, right? Because council has.
Yes, sir.
to.
Yes,
So
correct.
motion to recommend that, gosh.
Oh, no, I think I was missing.
There we go. So our PRZ 0219, recommend approval to city council.
Recommend for approval?
Yep.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? No? Roll call?
Buckler,
No.
Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kepner,
No.
Patterson,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Good luck. Okay, next item is, we have a couple discussion items ahead of us, so let's continue. Ms. Shudlow, would you please read it?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm a little different than our normal chairman.
Tonight, we're going to discuss the draft zoning ordinance permitting marijuana establishments in the city of Berkeley.
Okay. So I assume everybody read the document that we have before us. I have a question, if I may start. It's all through here. I thought I knew all the different licenses, but I see, and I may have forgotten. Oh, you know what? I just know. Never mind. I saw retailers and provisioning center, but I see that's medical marijuana. So never mind. As I looked at it here, there's my answer. So, anybody else?
I do. So, Mr. Chair?
Ms. Buckler?
All right. So I understand there was overwhelming support for the ballot initiative, and I've had a lot of discussions on this matter with members of the community and in other communities that are dealing with this. There's been several communities that had overwhelming support for the ballot initiative and yet voted on another ballot to disallow them in their entirety. So I'm not necessarily in that camp. I think there can be a place. I think this ordinance, the way it's written, is far too loose and open. No disrespect, Mr. Baumgarten, for that. But I think that there is still, and there's still the issue that it is not legal at the federal level. I know that doesn't matter for the state of Michigan, and I highly doubt anything's going to happen. But I think we need a little bit more control of these businesses as they place in Berkley, in that I think there should be, in my opinion, they should not have access to any shared parking agreements. They should not have access to any city-owned parking lots, because, I think they should be gated parking or fenced parking to accommodate the removal of cash, since they're going to be dealing in cash for some amount of time until the banking regulations loosen up, unless I could be wrong. You can, of course, correct me. Feel free in the public comments. But I don't think that eliminates the places that they could be held. I mean, we have some by the statute, which is, however many feet, 500 feet from a school, and then we have to wonder, what we do about, part-time summer camp, programs, maybe in churches. I don't know that that's going to be an issue, because they're not traditional daycare centers, but there might be daycare centers for 3 months out of the year, or several hours a day. And then, what district do they go in, and how do we dovetail them in so that it's still a family-friendly community and families can go into certain areas, and if they want to expose their children to it, that's fine. But otherwise, I think there's going to be a lot of traffic in and out. These are going to mostly be people. I don't think there's going to be a lot of walk-in necessarily. I've been to other cities where there have, and they're in certain districts and they work great, but Berkeley's a little small and compact, and there's not a lot of room to go. But we have some places that they'll work, and I really think they need to have their own parking, adequate parking, and it needs to be separate.
Thank you.
That's my opinion. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a couple questions.
Ms. Kemper.
I don't know if Mr. Baumgarten, you're the one I should be addressing questions to. We have a set.
Excuse me, who wrote this? Who wrote this ordinance? Is this Mr. Baumgarten? This is our first time looking at it.
It came from Matt.
Did you?
City attorney, probably.
The city attorney write this?
Lawyer, right?
It's been a collaborative effort across administration. We've been working on it with members of my office, community development director, city attorney. We've been soliciting outside organizations for help, speaking with other communities. There's a lot that's gone into the draft so far.
Like any other ordinance?
Sure, yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's go ahead, Ms. Kemper.
Do we have a number of establishments that we're going to allow in total?
In the regulatory framework ordinance, we're proposing 3. 3 total across the city.
Oh, I thought it was 3 of just retail.
It's been evolving, but we're looking at now 3 locations, period.
Any category.
Yes.
3 total locations.
And we're working in parallel. There's 2 other things going on in parallel with the zoning portions of it. There's a regulatory framework, and then there's also an meritorious application process as well, that we're trying to incentivize specific locations as being preferable. Same thing as with use as well. So we would have incentivized retail or dispensary locations, looking specifically the conversations we've had with City Council is the preference would be something along Woodward or 11 miles, potential redevelopment opportunities as well, utilizing a vacant building or an unused building and redeveloping that. There are a couple of things that would go along with the zoning portions of this, but essentially we don't want to, the proposal here is not to close the door to any specific zoning district, but select those 3 based on the merits of the application itself.
Mr. Chair, correct me if I'm wrong. Really what this discussion of this ordinance is just where you would place them. It's not any operational standards or anything of that nature. It's just where you would be allowed to have one of these facilities, correct?
Right. Most of the rest of that would be found in the regulatory ordinance.
And if I'm not mistaken, grow can only occur in an industrial agricultural unless we're talking about the micro-business license, which from seed to sale sort of can occur anywhere.
That's correct. And functionally, though, given the building stock we have in the city, a grow is incredibly unlikely.
Yeah.
The just square footage isn't there in a lot of our buildings.
Right.
And our conversation up to this point has really been focusing on retail and provisioning centers.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question to follow up on that. The laboratories, would that have to stay in an industrial sector as well, based on its function?
The laboratories right now are proposed to be part of the restricted to 3. You know, if we do get a fantastic laboratory proposal, then we'd be looking at it. But
Wouldn't it have to go in one of our districts that allows for that type of operation?
Under the
I think
proposed
that's like 11
ordinance
Mile
here.
or maybe Greenfield, I'm not sure.
One of the things that we've been discussing too in parallel with this, and like I said, the proposal here is to ask that a public hearing be set as we continue to fine tune this. But there's conversations too about eventually allowing it in an office use, in which biomedical research is already a permittable use.
Okay.
And this falling in line really with that intent. But talking about that is longer term, getting through the initial portions of it, looking at what the standards look like, and then as the state continues to clarify its position on this, as the industry continues to evolve, looking at reassessing this in a couple of years to see if that's a potential option for us.
Mr. Chair, your statement that right now you're looking at a maximum of 3 facilities, that's not yet reflected in language in the proposed ordinance, is that right? Because when I reviewed it this afternoon, it struck me there was a potential for a multitude of facilities depending on the type of facility.
Yes, we previously had a draft that looked at allowing 3 of each kind.
Okay, so
on aggregate, though, you'd be looking at several, up to a dozen, I think, those businesses across the city.
Right.
Prevailing logic right now in our conversations at the administrative level is that simply too many.
Okay.
What we are examining language for right now is really clarifying that we're looking at 3 locations.
All right.
If per se a retail location, or say we do get somebody who wants to do a very small scale growth, they've got the square footage to add production as well, but it's all contained on the same rooftop. Okay. Is there a way of permitting that? But right now we're still talking about 3 locations. Okay,
that clears up a lot of confusion in my mind. And I've got one other question about the draft licensing ordinance. It refers to disfavoring locations within 500 feet of enumerated intersections within the town. I don't remember all the intersections, but there are several. Can you just explain what that is all about?
Certainly. We had previously tried this through the Gateway Zoning District. So essentially, it's not the first business you see as you're crossing into the community at its borders or crossing into the downtown area specifically. That's why 12 and Coolidge is included in that enumerated list. Essentially, it's not a use we want to just greet people as they enter the city, and that is the prevailing thought behind that. The problem with that is the Gateway District doesn't include all of those districts. It doesn't have the good coverage, and there are areas where the Gateway District is not applied evenly as a zoning area. Specifically looking at 12 and Coolidge, it actually proceeds all the way west to Kipling. And so it really is a very large area, larger than what we really our intent was as far as prohibiting these uses.
Okay, and now I have a question about this proposed ordinance. Was any consideration given to making these stores a special use within these districts? Why was the approach taken to have them as a permitted use instead of a special use?
Sure.
I'm just wondering if you could discuss that.
Yes, sir. Twofold. So we setting up an administrative review process for the business itself. We believe we can very well cover that, and then it gets turned over, these being commercial areas and redevelopment of commercial areas, it would turn over to the Planning Commission for the site plan review process. And that does give this body some control over the look and the aesthetics and the placement of that redeveloped building. But permitting, the question of permitting the business itself, the best practices that we were seeing across the state of Michigan was that be handled as an administrative function, much like some of our other retail locations and business license locations.
Okay, thanks. I may have other questions, but thanks.
Mr. Baumgartner, why was 11 Mile singled out as a possible grower facilities? I think that, if
Sort
I'm not correct.
Yes,
or
sir.
if I'm
Sort of the
incorrect,
industrial
that's
history of the structures that are there now would best lend themselves, I think, to growth and production. If it's got a chance of going anywhere, it would be some of those buildings.
Yeah, because the nature of our town, as everybody knows, it's our commercial, industrial, office, you name it, everything but residential is very long and very thin. Now, wherever we put this, especially taking out those 6 intersections, wherever we put this, it's going to be right next to somebody's yard.
Yes, sir.
Just like everything else is. They just are. So, I don't have a horse in this race, but I just want people to realize that the difficult thing is it's going to affect somebody directly. Is it any worse than another use? I don't know. I'm more worried about the cash basis than anything else, I would think, at this point. But taking out those intersections, it's always going to be next door to somebody's yard. No matter, there's not a site in town where it won't be. So.
That's true, sir.
Yeah, okay.
It's an unfortunate, just the way the city was platted. Same thing as anywhere is any of our commercial districts. They're, to your point, they're very shallow.
Yep, okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair, if there is interest in disallowing growth of production, I don't think there'll be a lot of objection from that, from administration at least. The vast majority of the interest that we've had so far from the industry has been on the retail and provisioning side. My understanding so far of this industry is that growth is likely to be concentrated in outlying areas where large facilities can be developed. That might be too much of a generalization for the industry. We could very well get an application that's phenomenal in that regard, but at the same time, if the commission doesn't feel that that's an appropriate use in the city, then we can look at coming back with you for something that allows for only retail.
Yeah, they do tend to be larger because there's economy of scale because of the electrical requirements, the so-called scrubber requirements on the exhaust, things like that for a grow facility. And as I said, economy of scale, a big one. We happen to be involved with one on the west side of the state. It's 20,000 square feet, and that's considered small. So out in the middle of nowhere. So, so anyway, that's, and it's built like a prison. So,
not the aesthetic we're looking for.
No.
So, Mr. Chair, that actually brings up a good point. I'd like to ask the city manager, are we going to have some provisions in here regarding bars or shutters? Because my concern is the security needed for some of these facilities, and like, how are we going to keep them from looking like fortresses? I don't know what our rules are now with pull-down shutters. I don't know if we allow them. I can only remember the neighborhood shop used to have them, but I don't know that was probably pre-site plan or modern site plan ordinances.
As long as they're mid-century modern shutters.
You can actually get interior ones that aren't seen from the exterior.
So that might be something that we want to build in, that there can't be any external.
Sure. And we want these developments to be outliers in whatever district they land in. So that's why we thought it best to come before this board under site plan approval in order to ensure that that is the case.
So the more that we can bake in, that it just becomes, so we don't end up with our opinion and it's in ordinances, easier. So.
I have a question.
Mr. Trotter.
Are these facilities, are they going to be permitted similar to like a bar, where you're going to get a permit from the city and you'll have to go before them and get the correct permitting, and will they have any contact with the residents in the area around them? Because I'll be honest, I wouldn't, thinking of where I live, okay, if there was one at the end of my block, I wouldn't be happy. You know, I got kids, I know what's going to be going in and out of there. I see it all the time on 8 Mile and what's going on out there, and I see the look of these buildings. They look like they're just these green and white buildings and laid up like Christmas trees, and I really, frankly, don't want to see that down the street from my house. I mean, are they going to permit this in a manner where people have a say if they're on the end of their block, or is it going to be somewhere it just appears and the people have to deal with it?
I think it's the latter.
It's
the way the ordinance is written. I think it's the latter.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Trotto is getting at is the principal use versus a special use, and that's been brought up earlier. And if you ask us, I think the consensus is, and I'm one of a couple here who spoke, that we may want to see it as a special use in lieu of a permit by right. So I'm one more person, so it's just...
I mean, the other thing I have is regarding the specific aesthetics of it. The ones that I see, if you drive down 8 Mile Road, they stand out. I mean, they glow in the dark, bright green. I
Lighting
really
ordinance.
don't want to see something like that in our community. That is not Berkeley.
I agree. Yeah, to the extent that we're able to, our intent is to get into the aesthetics as much as we can. That's there's a look in this community. There's a standard in this community, and bright green neon paint with neon lights and some pun name. That doesn't fit our community.
I mean, personally, I see this as something that ends up down an 8 Mile. I don't see this as a Berkeley community thing. I personally think we should write the ordinance in a manner that it can't be within 500 feet of a residential house. It shouldn't be anywhere near a residential house, or even at the end of a block. Unfortunately, that limits them to no place in this city.
Right. We may end up getting tagged for exclusionary zoning at that point.
Mr. Kebab is the only place that would fit that.
Yeah, put it right next to our city hall.
Yeah, welcome to
It's in
Berkeley.
the Gateway District.
Yep.
They might
Anybody
sell
else?
a lot of sandwiches.
As they smile.
We're going off on a tangent here. Anybody else?
I do.
Ms. Kempner?
The other thing I was thinking is, like when I think of an RC kind of process, like I'm a developer or I'm a business owner and I want to open one, if I go through the ordinance and what I see is, well, these are allowable uses without any other notation that says you can only have 3 in the city, then, it's not super clear to me that I might not be able to go forward with it. So I don't know how you note that specifically in there, but...
A couple, our intent right now is to make that very clear through the application process, what the city's intent is, not only with the areas where we're looking at essentially giving points for specific application aspects, but also to note that very clearly that there are 3 that will be permitted. Even if we get 50 applications, we're allowing 3 of these right now, and no more, no less. So we were looking to make that clear through the application process. We can also make that clear in the zoning area as well, but certainly you won't be able to read through our application materials and have any sort of ambiguity on the number that we're going to be permitting.
Anybody else? No comments? Mr. Richardson?
It's just occurred to me, so it might be off the wall, but if you're determined to only have 3, maybe an additional zoning district should be created in the 3 spots that you've identified as suitable be put into that district, and that's the end of the matter. I mean...
So rezoning, I don't want to be in a situation where we're rezoning specific parcels to a district. I don't want to...
Well, I thought you were implying that you are trying to identify specific locations. Maybe I was wrong.
So 3 locations would be permitted through the process.
But you're not going to predetermine where those
3
are.
facilities.
Right. No, we're not looking to predetermine that, again, to the extent above and beyond the zoning of this process. What we do want is to incentivize through the application process, right now locations on Woodward and 11 Mile as potential redevelopment sites.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Baumgarten, won't you have to put in ordinance the number of facilities? I mean, just
Yes,
for
ma'am.
the safety of the city. I mean, so we don't deal with any type of legal challenges on this. I mean, we can pass an ordinance as long as it's in compliance with, the standards, which this could be part of that. I think it would be easier, and I think I actually kind of like the idea of a zoning district for it, or I don't know if we do it as an overlay district. I'm not really sure which mechanism would work best. That would put them where the city wants them. I mean, quite frankly, that's within our purview here to make that determination and put it out there for public hearing and go with it. I agree with Mr. Trotto that while there's a overwhelming support for the idea of legalization of marijuana, I think there's a lot of people who are not going to want it in their backyard, and it's literally going to be in someone's backyard. There's little way around that, and I thankfully don't live on the end of a street, but somebody's going to be very unhappy in this community because of that. And
We're the ones making that decision.
well, I know that's a lot of power I don't really need or want, but I just feel like that there has to be a larger discussion as to, yep, we will have an ordinance, they will be allowed, maybe they'll be allowed in this area or that area, and then let's see what happens. But
Sure. And the way we're all talking up here, we're talking about severe restrictions, and that, as a practical matter, could narrow it down to just a handful of locations. If we're going to take the discussion into that direction, and I'm not sure we are.
But we've already done that with like car lots. I mean, we've done that already in our community repeatedly with business types, to certain like drive-throughs and car. I mean, we have restrictions on that. They can't just go anywhere they want to go. And this is no different. This is a little different in that we're dealing with a more sensitive subject, and there's a standard for liquor stores. This is not liquor or a bar. It still is a highly regulated substance. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is, and I, of course, do not speak for the entire community, but we can just work through something that I think kind of puts it down the middle.
Sure. And through the chair, when we come back to you next month, hopefully if a public hearing is set this evening, we would like to bring back with you in context along with the regulatory side. And ideally, I'd like to have the early workings of the application, not process, but documents in place as well. You'll see it is, I think we're on the right track for regulating this particular use. And making sure that it is not either clustered in some specific area of the city and spread out so it can't cause a public nuisance or any of the things that we would normally be concerned with under, say, a special land use or something in the like. But you're right, we do need to specifically limit that number in the ordinance so it's very clear at the onset, and that's found in the regulatory portions.
And Mr. Murad.
I think I like the idea of it being a special use rather than right in the ordinance, because like drive-throughs, that's a special use. So when a facility wants to go in a specific location, the people that live around that facility know that that's what's being proposed.
The only issue with making it a special land use, you'd have to add language making it non-transferable to somebody else. It doesn't just run with the land. It runs with the applicant and the land.
A conditional special land use. You say that too.
I did.
And Mr. Chair, there would need to be I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Please. Apologies. I would still advocate for an administrative process in which the multitude of applications are narrowed down to still 3, and then they come before that body at that point, because I would not want to see an agenda where you guys have every application for this business before you in an evening, because it likely will be 3 days of continuous meetings. So I would still advocate there for an administrative process that allows us to narrow down the applications to 3 that then would, if we do the special land use route, that would then go before you as a special land use.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Buckler.
So, Mr. Baumgarten, would the applicants have to have a license in hand before they made the application? This is like chicken and egg, the daycare thing. I mean, the application process is quite expensive, at least for what I've seen is proposed, and the amount of cash that they have to have. So, do they need a license in hand?
They need to be pre-qualified through the state in order to make application to us.
Okay, and then I go back to, I agree with Mr. Murad on the special use or the conditional special use, because I have a feeling we're going to do through a lot of hoop jumping to get something approved, and then I have a feeling there's going to be some financial meltdown of these applicants as they get through the state licensing process. They might be pre-approved, but they don't have a license in hand, so it's going to be dicey. It's going to be time-consuming and cash-consuming, and I'm a little concerned with how I still feel like we're going to be like in a little bit of a do loop, if anybody can remember, what was that, BASIC or Fortran? Back when we programmed it's going to be a little bit of a do loop for a while on these because we don't really know. And, we might have a bust of or a boom of these for a couple of years, and then, like other communities, people are still buying it on the black market, and they're not going to these centers. So, and then we're stuck with a lot of work. So, I don't know. But I like the idea of a special use, conditional special use.
I think, Mr. Baumgarten, if you're asking us as a planning commission, I think that's our biggest hang-up with this ordinance, is the permitted use by right as opposed to a special use. I'd also like a clarification. Those 6 intersections, please explain again why those are exempt.
Essentially, they would be the first properties you would see coming into the community, whether it's at any of our major intersections.
And, we don't want...
And we don't want that to be essentially, the thought behind it is that we don't want that to be the first use that someone sees when entering Berkley. That's not the ambassador to the community for anybody who is either entering from the outskirts or entering to the downtown area.
To me, that tells me a lot about the writers of this ordinance that, yay, we want it, but we don't want it at our entry points. We want to, slide it someplace else, let the planning commission deal with it. To me, that
goes to it right there.
It's a little facetious, but to me, that tells me there's a little bit of uncertainty about what they want to do with this, and that's my opinion. But there's a lot of businesses in town we're maybe not proud of, and here's another one we want to add. And my biggest hang-up is and will be, it's next to somebody's backyard or side yard. And especially excluding those 6 intersections, because I did a map a while ago of my own. Those are the locations that don't abut people's yards. And so I'd like the drafters of this to maybe take a look. I assume you're asking us to hold a public hearing, but I don't know. Are we ready?
No.
That's our consensus.
Well, work is ongoing on this, and we would be sharing that with you. But there is a timeline that we put in place through the moratorium process at the city council level that would have this, that we want to be ready to accept applications by January 1st. Yes. We do think we're on target with that to come back with you with a completed and fleshed out zoning ordinance, a regulatory framework, as well as an application process. So I would ask that the commission do please set that public hearing as administration is working towards meeting your needs.
Well, I think it's up to you to set the public hearing.
Yeah,
we don't set it.
We do. I honestly don't have an issue setting a public hearing, but I don't think this is the ordinance we want to hear.
But I think he can
so to speak, or discuss. I think it needs some work.
That's why we came to you. That's why we came to you a month in advance, so that we can get that feedback, and we don't do that through the public hearing process, and we're not, asking you to make a recommendation in the same meeting that you're seeing it for the first time.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Just a point of clarification. I do think the administration engaging in a nominating process, as it might be called, would be a good idea. I did 63 of these cases. It took a long time and a lot of effort. So, I think it's advisable to have administration really delve deep into this and then make recommendations to the commission and the council, frankly.
Any last words?
Well, I guess my last words is if the administration really wants us to have a public hearing, it doesn't obligate us to do any particular thing after that hearing, and we would get the benefit of public opinion.
We will.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just would like something a little bit more fleshed out to work from, I think.
Well, I think that would be desirable, but I'm hearing, some urgency with Mr. Baumgarten, and I don't object to it so much that I would want a roadblock.
Like I say, the intent of coming before you this evening was to absolutely gather your feedback, and so that we can come back with something that you're happier with and the public can read and know that it's pretty close to being the final version. We've been posting drafts throughout this process as we've been making updates with a feedback module. It's right on our city's website. and we've been gathering feedback as we go along. So I did not want to take permission by surprise. I did not want to ask you guys to vote on something that's either incomplete or is filled with new recommendations that need to be incorporated before it moves on to the council level. So I'm appreciative of the feedback this evening and look forward to honing the document to your taste before the September meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any last words? Nope. Good, done. Thank you. Item 5.
Great power.
Ms. Shuto.
Responsibility.
Don't go anywhere, Matt.
Item 5 is the draft zoning ordinance amendment to section 138-551 to convert violation of the Berkley zoning ordinance from misdemeanors to municipal civil infractions. This is something that has been looked over and reviewed by the city attorney in order to well, this option is, or this discussion is multiple-fold. So right now, all of the violations are currently misdemeanors, and in order moving it to civil infractions allows us to right now, the offender would have to go to court, right? So the civil infractions allows us to discuss and go work with the applicant a little, or the offender a little bit more, instead of criminalizing certain property ownership violations.
Okay. I guess my question, is this a trend that, Mr. Baumgartner, is this, I'm not an attorney, obviously,
Sure. So this section stems from a conversation that City Council started having last November about the appropriateness of having criminal offenses for certain types of offenses, zoning offenses being one of them. And we've run into some logistical issues with not just the burden of proof required in order to go to court with zoning issues, but also the amount of time that it takes from a notice period to us getting to resolution. So over the last several months, we've been kind of going item by item on those offenses that were deemed to be misdemeanors right now. By and large, looking at the zoning portion as an area where a criminal record being created out of this is not appropriate, and the burden of proof has been cumbersome in enforcement. So that's why we come before you today to gauge your openness to converting these to municipal civil infractions, which are still something that goes before a judge, is still a violation, but it's just not, doesn't come with the standard of it being a criminal offense.
so it should streamline the process.
That's the intent. Mm-hmm.
Any comments from our attorneys?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
I'd like to know why it has to be an either-or proposition. I totally understand why you want to give yourself you want to authorize yourself to bring this as a civil infraction. I totally get that. I don't know why, though, that we couldn't retain the option of charging a misdemeanor in an egregious situation.
I think we still, in conversation with our city attorney, we do still have the option of, after an individual, if an individual were to disregard a municipal civil infraction, that they would then be guilty of a misdemeanor at that point. So we have the ability to escalate, but as our first line of defense, we'd like commission and council too. There's a process where we went through on the regulatory side, the non-zoning ordinance, where we're also making the same recommendation to specific sections as well. But yes, under an escalation protocol, I think we can get to a misdemeanor, but we'd like that first line to be a municipal civil infraction.
And I think it would be a rare situation, but I wouldn't want to give that up, for all time. Can you provide the roadmap for that, or at least tell me where to look for it in the code?
Now off the top of my head, sir, and I apologize for that, but I'll make sure you have it.
Okay, thanks.
A question, Mr. Chair? Just quick. So under the current process, if they are charged with a misdemeanor, the city doesn't assess fines then and penalties, right? It goes to they go to court, and the court then can do whatever, and it may not be.
Mm-hmm. We can
so
make requests.
But now you can assess fines because it's a civil infraction, correct?
We still make the request to the judge of what our preferred resolution would be. And depending on what it is, sometimes we might be requesting that we are allowed to go on the property and mitigate the violation on behalf of the property owner and assess those costs back to them, instead of just saying, you know, it's a $500 fee and the ticket's dismissed.
You can do that with a civil infraction, correct?
Yes.
Can you do the same thing with a
We have
misdemeanor?
that latitude. We have that latitude with both misdemeanors and municipal civil
Personally, I
infractions.
like that it's a civil infraction. I think it's going to be so rare when it gets up to a misdemeanor, but I think a civil infraction is a better way to do it.
We've had some characters in front of us.
True, but this could be simply it could be simple as like they didn't meet code when they built something, or these home renovations, these people who do it themselves. It could be a simple code missing
And the ones that
Vinyl siding on 11 Mile.
Vinyl siding on 11 Mile.
Don't leave yet.
but we've been assured that route is still there in an unusual case.
I'm fine with this language change personally.
Anybody else? Okay.
I'm good with it.
Thank you.
As Community Development Director said, it'll come back to you as an actual action item, but we wanted to have this discussion first.
Okay. Appreciate it. At this point, liaison reports.
Nothing to report from environmental.
Okay. What else do we have?
Planning Commission?
Your planning commissions.
Yeah, I am. So they had a very successful cruise fest and pub crawl over the weekend.
Okay.
So
That's the Chamber of Commerce, you mean? Other planning commission.
Chamber of Commerce for the Planning Commission. And they are now working on planning for the Irish Fest.
Good.
Coming up in a couple weeks.
EDA?
I'm a bad liaison this month. So I apologize, I did not attend the meeting. I, other items interfering with it.
Okay. I actually attended the city council meeting. It was a extremely long city council meeting, and we were lucky to have the last two items, item 18 and 19. Both were first readings. 18 was for the child care ordinance. 19 was for the La Salette school property rezoning. Both passed unanimously. Very little discussion. So that was that. Any comment? Let's start this end.
Nothing further.
I just forgot to mention last week that I appreciated Ann Shadell as a commissioner and a mentor to this board. I forgot to thank her last time for her years of service.
She was here a while. Yeah. Thank you.
Nothing further.
I just want to sort of apologize for my attire. I came right from the football field here today. So,
Nobody can see your spikes.
yeah, but next 2 months, 3 months, I'll be wearing football gear pretty much here. So
We don't have a dress code. Mr. Murad?
Nothing at it.
I'm going to ask Mr. Baumgartner, what's new with the vinyl siding on the old Holly Market?
Mr. Chair, you have a fantastic staff liaison here who is prepared to answer any and all of your questions.
Excellent. Ms. Schluto?
Unfortunately, I don't have wonderful news for you. He's still out of the country, so I have met and discussed with his contractor about a project that he's doing on another parcel. So I have informed him to make sure he contacts the Community Development Department when he returns from his vacation.
I know we spoke of characters before, so. Yeah, again, I'm going to ask that every month because that's something that's with all of us, those of us who are been around here a while. It's a big bugaboo for us. So, and it has ramifications for other projects in the future because we set precedent. So, okay, with that, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Aye.
I like doing that. Thank you, everybody.